My entire family attended my sister's wedding, except for me. They didn't even tell me it was happening. But when I walked into that reception with my plus one, the look of absolute terror on my mother's face told me everything I needed to know about why I'd been excluded. Picture this: a beautiful venue, string quartet playing, 200 guests in their finest attire, and my sister Melissa in her dream dress, finally marrying into the wealthy family my parents had always hoped for. Everything was perfect, exactly the kind of flawless event my image-obsessed family lived for. Then I walked through those doors in my navy blue dress, arm in arm with a man in a crisp black suit whose presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. My mother dropped her champagne glass. My father's face went white. And Melissa? She looked like she'd seen a ghost. You see, they thought they'd successfully excluded the family troublemaker, me, from their perfect day. They thought they could continue living their carefully constructed lies without anyone asking uncomfortable questions. But what they didn't realize was that by keeping me away, they'd given me the time and motivation to uncover secrets that would destroy the pristine reputation they'd spent decades building. What happened next would expose a web of corruption involving my family, local politicians, and millions of dollars in dirty money. And it all started because they couldn't handle having their black sheep daughter at a wedding. To understand how I became persona non grata in my own family, I need to take you back to the golden child and the scapegoat, and how those roles shaped our entire lives. My name is Riley, and I'm 28 years old. I work as an investigative journalist for our city's newspaper, which, as you'll soon understand, made me dangerous to my family in ways I never fully realized. My sister Melissa is 25, works in real estate, and has always been everything my parents wanted in a daughter: beautiful, agreeable, and most importantly, she never asked questions they didn't want to answer. Growing up, the favoritism wasn't even subtle. Melissa got the brand name clothes while I shopped at thrift stores. She got a car for her 16th birthday, while I worked part-time jobs to save for bus fare. When college time came, my parents paid for Melissa's entire education at a private university, while I earned scholarships and worked 3 jobs to get through state school. But here's what really set me apart from the family dynamic. I had an inconvenient habit of noticing things that didn't add up, like how my parents could afford their upscale lifestyle on my dad's mid-level accounting salary and my mom's part-time interior design work, or why certain family friends always seemed nervous when I was around, cutting conversations short when I entered a room. See, my parents, David and Susan, were obsessed with maintaining their social status in our community. They belonged to the country club, hosted elaborate dinner parties, and made sure everyone knew they moved in the right circles. Image was everything to them, and I was the daughter who kept pointing out that the emperor had no clothes. Melissa, on the other hand, was their masterpiece. She never questioned why we had money for expensive vacations, but claimed we couldn't afford to help with my college loans. She never wondered why certain topics were off limits at family gatherings. She just smiled, looked beautiful, and played her role perfectly. When Melissa got engaged to Brandon, a 30-year-old businessman from one of the most prominent families in our city, my parents were over the moon. This wasn't just a wedding, it was their ticket into the highest levels of local society. Brandon's family owned construction companies, had political connections, and moved in circles that could elevate my parents' status even further. But there was one problem with their perfect family portrait: the daughter who asked too many questions, who had a career built on uncovering uncomfortable truths, and who had never learned to keep her mouth shut when things didn't seem right. Looking back now, I can see they were already planning to phase me out. Family gatherings became less frequent, and when they did happen, I'd notice conversations stopping when I walked into rooms. Extended family members would give me sympathetic looks, as if they knew something I didn't. My cousin Jamie later told me there had been family meetings, actual meetings, where they discussed how to handle the Riley problem. But I was so focused on building my career and trying to maintain some connection with the family I thought loved me that I missed the signs of what was really coming. Then, 3 weeks before what I thought was the wedding date, Melissa stopped returning my calls entirely. When I asked my parents about it, they gave me vague answers about last-minute stress and vendor issues. They said the wedding might be postponed, that they were still working out details. I should have known something was seriously wrong when my cousin Jamie called me on a Saturday morning, her voice shaking. "Riley," she said, "are you sitting down? Because you need to see something." She sent me a link to my aunt's Facebook page. There, in living color, were dozens of photos from Melissa's wedding reception, posted just hours earlier. The wedding had happened the night before, a beautiful ceremony at the Riverside Country Club, followed by an elegant reception with all my extended family in attendance. Everyone was there. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, even people I barely knew had been invited to my sister's wedding. Everyone except me. I stared at those photos in complete disbelief. There was Melissa in her stunning white gown, looking radiant as she danced with Brandon. There were my parents, beaming with pride as they posed with the happy couple. There was our entire extended family celebrating what was supposed to be one of the most important days in our family's history. And I hadn't even known it was happening. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about missing a party. They had orchestrated an elaborate deception to exclude me from my own sister's wedding. They had lied to my face for months, telling me the date was still uncertain, while secretly sending invitations to everyone else. When I called Jamie back, sobbing, she told me what she'd learned from other family members. "They had meetings, Riley," she said quietly. "Actual family meetings to discuss whether to invite you, and they decided you were too much of a risk." "What kind of risk?" I demanded. "They were afraid you'd cause a scene or ask embarrassing questions or somehow mess up Melissa's perfect day. Your dad told everyone you were going through a difficult phase and might not be stable enough to handle such an important event." The gaslighting was immediate and brutal. When I finally got my mother on the phone, she acted like excluding me had been the most reasonable decision in the world. "We didn't want any drama on Melissa's special day," she said coolly. "You know how you get when you're stressed." How I get? I'm a professional journalist who's covered everything from city council meetings to murder trials without losing my composure. But somehow, in my mother's version of reality, I was too unstable to attend my own sister's wedding. My father was even worse. "We thought you wouldn't want to come anyway," he said with a dismissive wave when I confronted them in person. "You're always so critical of family events. We figured you'd be happier working on one of your stories." But Melissa's silence was the cruelest cut of all. My sister, who I defended countless times when other people criticized her choices, who I supported through breakups and job changes and every major life event, wouldn't even take my calls to explain why she'd allowed our parents to exclude me from her wedding. That's when I realized this wasn't really about one wedding invitation. This was about power, control, and keeping me away from something they desperately didn't want me to see or hear. And the more they tried to gaslight me into thinking their behavior was normal, the more my journalist instincts started screaming that there was a much bigger story here. So I started digging, and what I found would change everything. As I started digging into why they really didn't want me at that wedding, I uncovered a web of lies that went back years. You have to understand, being an investigative journalist means you develop certain skills. You learn how to trace financial records, how to spot inconsistencies in people's stories, how to find the connections that others miss. And for the first time in my life, I turned those skills on my own family. It started with simple questions that had bothered me for years. How could my parents afford their lifestyle? My father worked as a mid-level accountant at a regional firm. My mother did occasional interior design work for friends. Yet they lived in a $500,000 house, belonged to an exclusive country club, took expensive vacations, and always seemed to have money for whatever Melissa needed. I started with public records. Property deeds, business licenses, court filings, all the boring paperwork that tells the real story of people's financial lives. What I found was immediately suspicious. My parents' house had been purchased with cash 15 years ago, right around the time my father's accounting firm started handling contracts for several major construction projects in the city. Then I looked into Brandon's family business. The Hendersons owned 3 construction companies that had won dozens of city contracts over the past decade. Road improvements, public building renovations, park developments, they seemed to get awarded a suspicious number of lucrative government jobs. But here's where it got really interesting. The accounting firm that handled the books for these city contracts, the one that certified all the financial paperwork and ensured everything was above board, my father's company.
But the deeper I dug, the worse it got. This wasn't just simple corruption. It was a sophisticated money laundering operation involving multiple businesses, shell companies, and what looked like millions of dollars in fraudulent activity over more than a decade. And Melissa's wedding? It wasn't just a social event. I realized, looking at the guest list Jamie had shared with me, that it was essentially a gathering of everyone involved in this corruption network. City council members, construction executives, local business owners, all the people who had been profiting from this scheme were there, celebrating and strengthening their connections. No wonder they didn't want me there. An investigative journalist at a gathering of co-conspirators would have been like bringing a lit match to a gas station. But as I continued investigating, my family escalated their campaign against me. They started telling people I was having a mental health crisis. They claimed I was harassing them because I was jealous of Melissa's success. My father actually called my editor to suggest that I was becoming unstable and perhaps shouldn't be working on sensitive stories. The psychological warfare was brutal and effective. They were systematically destroying my credibility while positioning themselves as the victims of my supposed breakdown. Some extended family members started avoiding me, clearly believing whatever story my parents were telling about my mental state. That's when I met Agent Sarah Chen. I was working on what I thought was a completely separate story about irregularities in city contracting when Sarah approached me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She was FBI, she explained, and she'd been watching my investigative work with interest. "We've been building a case on municipal corruption for 2 years," she told me quietly. "Your family's name keeps coming up in our investigation." The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Federal investigators had independently identified the same corruption network I'd been uncovering, and my family was right in the middle of it. Sarah and I began working together, sharing information and coordinating our efforts. She had the federal resources and legal authority that I lacked, while I had the local knowledge and investigative skills that complemented her work. More importantly, she believed me when I explained how my own family was trying to gaslight and discredit me. "They're scared," she told me. "People do desperate things when they're about to lose everything they've built on lies." That's when we started planning something that would expose the truth in the most dramatic way possible. Because while my family thought they had successfully isolated and silenced me, they had no idea that I now had an FBI agent as my ally. And Melissa was about to have another reception, this time for their anniversary celebration that my parents were hosting at their house. Another gathering of the corruption network. Another opportunity for them to consolidate their power and connections. But this time, I was going to be there, whether they wanted me or not. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a wedding invitation. It was about power, control, and keeping their dirty secrets buried. But I had something they didn't expect. Allies they didn't even know existed. Working with Agent Chen over the next several months was like having a masterclass in federal investigation techniques. She taught me how to properly document evidence, how to protect sources, and how to build an airtight case that would stand up in court. But more than that, she validated everything I'd been feeling about my family's behavior.
Financial criminals often isolate family members who might expose them, she explained during one of our meetings. Your parents weren't just protecting their secret. They were protecting a criminal enterprise that's been operating for over a decade. The scope of what we uncovered was staggering. The corruption network involved not just my father's accounting firm and Brandon's construction companies, but also city council members, the mayor's office, and at least a dozen local businesses. They had been systematically defrauding the city out of millions of dollars through inflated contracts, kickbacks, and money laundering schemes. My parents' beautiful lifestyle had been built on stolen taxpayer money. Every expensive vacation, every country club membership they bought for Melissa, it had all been paid for with funds stolen from our community. But Sarah had a bigger plan than just building a case. The FBI had been watching this network for 2 years, gathering evidence and building relationships with informants. They were almost ready to move, but they needed one final piece: documentation of the network's current activities and confirmation of who the key players were. Your parents are hosting that anniversary party next month. According to our intelligence, it's going to be like a reunion of everyone involved in the corruption scheme. City officials, construction executives, business owners, all the people who had been profiting from this scheme will be there, celebrating and strengthening their connections. That's when she made a proposition that took my breath away. "What if you attended that party as my date?" she asked. "You'd be our inside eyes and ears, helping us document who's there and what they're discussing. And it would give us the perfect opportunity to serve warrants and make arrests when we have everyone gathered in one place." The poetic justice was almost too perfect. My parents had excluded me from Melissa's wedding to protect their criminal network from exposure. Now I would attend their anniversary party with an FBI agent, bringing their entire corrupt world crashing down.
We spent weeks planning every detail. Sarah obtained court approval for surveillance equipment, coordinated with local law enforcement, and prepared arrest warrants for multiple individuals. I studied photos and backgrounds of everyone we expected to attend, learning about their roles in the corruption network and what evidence we needed to document. The psychological preparation was almost as important as the logistical planning. Sarah helped me understand that my family's treatment of me had been emotional abuse designed to isolate and control me. The gaslighting, the character assassination, the systematic exclusion, it was all part of keeping me away from their criminal activities. "They knew you had the skills to expose them," she told me. "That's why they worked so hard to discredit you. They were trying to neutralize the threat you represented." But there were moments when I wavered. These were still my parents, my sister. Was I really prepared to destroy their lives? Was exposing their crimes worth losing my family forever? Sarah was gentle but firm when I expressed these doubts. "Riley, they already chose their crimes over their relationship with you. They excluded you from major family events and tried to destroy your professional reputation to protect their illegal activities. You're not breaking up the family, you're refusing to let them continue breaking the law." She also helped me understand the broader impact of what we were doing. This corruption has cost your city millions of dollars that should have gone to schools, roads, public services. Real people have been hurt by what your family and their friends have been doing. You're not just seeking personal justice, you're helping your entire community. 2 weeks before the anniversary party, my parents called me. It was the first time they'd reached out in months, and I could hear the artificial sweetness in my mother's voice as she invited me to attend their celebration. "We've been thinking that maybe we were too harsh about the wedding situation. This is a family celebration, and we want you to be there." They were nervous about something. Maybe they'd heard rumors about federal investigators asking questions around town. Maybe one of their co-conspirators had warned them to keep their family members close and quiet. Whatever the reason, they suddenly wanted me back in the fold. I accepted their invitation gracefully, even suggesting that I'd like to bring a date, a wonderful man I'd been seeing who worked in law enforcement. My mother was so relieved that I wasn't fighting them that she immediately agreed. "That sounds lovely, dear. We can't wait to meet him." If only she knew.
The night of my parents' anniversary party, I walked through those doors with my FBI agent +1, and everything my family had worked to hide was about to come into the light. Sarah and I had planned every detail of our entrance. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that concealed the recording equipment she was wearing, while I chose an emerald green dress that made me feel confident and powerful. To anyone watching, we looked like an attractive couple arriving at an elegant party. But underneath our polished exterior, we were both focused and ready. Sarah had backup agents positioned around the neighborhood, search warrants ready to execute, and arrest teams standing by. I had a mental list of every person we expected to see and every piece of evidence we needed to document. The party was in full swing when we arrived at my parents' house. The same house that had been purchased with stolen money, filled with furniture and art bought with funds defrauded from our city. About 60 people were there: city council members, construction executives, local business owners, and their families. It was like a who's who of municipal corruption. My parents were initially delighted to see me. My mother rushed over to greet us, clearly thrilled that I was finally participating in a family event without causing problems. My father shook Sarah's hand warmly, asking about her work in law enforcement without any idea of what kind of law enforcement she actually did. "Riley has told us so much about you," my mother gushed to Sarah. "We're so glad she's found someone who understands her work." If she only knew how well Sarah understood my work. For the first hour, we mingled like normal party guests. I introduced Sarah to family members and family friends, many of whom I now knew were participants in the corruption network. Sarah was charming and professional, asking casual questions that seemed like normal party conversation, but were actually gathering intelligence about business relationships and financial arrangements. I watched my father hold court with several city council members, discussing upcoming construction projects and budget allocations. I saw Brandon's father showing off photos from a recent European vacation that I now knew had been funded by fraudulent city contracts. I observed my mother chatting with the wives of various business owners, all of them wearing jewelry and designer clothes purchased with stolen money. It was surreal seeing this network of criminals socializing and celebrating without having any idea that everything they'd built was about to collapse. Then my father called for everyone's attention to make a toast. He stood in the center of the living room, raising his champagne glass, surrounded by his family and all his criminal associates. 25 years ago, Susan and I started building something special together. Not just our marriage, but our place in this community. We've been blessed with wonderful friends, successful business relationships, and the ability to provide for our family in ways we never dreamed possible. The crowd applauded politely, but I felt sick listening to him talk about blessings that were actually the proceeds of criminal activity. We've built something that will last for generations. Our daughter Melissa is now part of the Henderson family, extending our relationships and our success into the future. And our daughter Riley... He paused, looking at me with what seemed like genuine affection. "We're grateful she's here tonight to celebrate with us, bringing her new friend Sarah to meet our family." That's when Sarah stepped forward. "Thank you for including me," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the room. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I'm here as part of an ongoing investigation into municipal corruption and money laundering. Many of you in this room tonight are subjects of that investigation." The silence that followed was deafening. You could literally see the color drain from people's faces as they realized what was happening. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. My father's mouth fell open in shock. But Sarah wasn't finished. Over the past 2 years, the FBI has been investigating a criminal network involving fraudulent city contracts, kickback schemes, and money laundering operations. Many of you in this room tonight are subjects of that investigation. That's when the chaos began. Several people immediately started moving toward the exits, but Sarah calmly announced that federal agents were positioned outside and no one would be leaving until the investigation was complete. My parents turned to me with expressions of absolute betrayal and rage. "How could you do this? To your own family?" I excluded you from Melissa's wedding because you were afraid I'd expose your crimes. You tried to destroy my credibility and isolate me from the family to protect your illegal activities. You chose your criminal enterprise over your relationship with me. My father was shaking with fury. You ungrateful, vindictive... Mr. Patterson, I need to inform you that you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud. She nodded to agents who were now entering the house, and my father was immediately handcuffed. The next hour was a blur of arrests, search warrants being executed, and evidence being seized. 12 people were arrested that night, including both my parents, Brandon's father, 2 city council members, and several business owners. Through it all, I watched my family's carefully constructed world completely collapse. Melissa, who had arrived partway through the evening, stood crying in the corner as she realized her perfect life had been built on criminal activity. Brandon looked shock-shelled as his father was led away in handcuffs. But the person I felt sorriest for was my mother. As agents searched through her house, bagging evidence and photographing documents, she sat on her expensive sofa, bought with stolen money, and stared at me with complete devastation. "We gave you everything," she whispered. "You gave me lies," I replied. "And when I got close to the truth, you tried to destroy me to protect your secrets." As the evening ended and the last of the arrestees were taken away, Sarah and I stood in my parents' ransacked living room. The family portrait on the mantelpiece, the one showing our supposedly perfect family, had been knocked over during the search. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked gently. I thought about it for a moment, looking around at the ruins of everything my family had built on criminal activity. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely free." As I watched my family's carefully constructed world collapse around them, I realized that being excluded from that wedding was the best thing that ever happened to me. The aftermath of that night was swift and comprehensive. The FBI's investigation, combined with the evidence gathered at the anniversary party, resulted in one of the largest municipal corruption cases in our state's history. Over the following months, 18 people were indicted on charges ranging from fraud and money laundering to conspiracy and bribery. My father was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His accounting firm was shut down, and he was banned from practicing as a CPA. My mother received a 3-year sentence for money laundering and conspiracy. Their house was seized as proceeds of criminal activity, along with most of their other assets. Brandon's father got 10 years for his role as the ringleader of the construction company kickback schemes. Several city council members and other public officials were also sentenced to prison terms, and the entire city government had to be restructured to prevent future corruption. But the person whose story affected me most was Melissa. When the truth about our family's criminal activities became public, her entire world fell apart. Brandon broke off her engagement, not because he didn't love her, but because he couldn't handle being associated with the scandal. She lost her job in real estate when her clients decided they couldn't trust someone from a family of convicted criminals. For months, she refused to speak to me. In her mind, I was the sister who had destroyed her perfect life out of jealousy and revenge. She couldn't understand that I had chosen justice over family loyalty, or that her perfect life had been built on money stolen from our community. It took almost a year, but eventually Melissa came to me. She was living in a small apartment, working as a server at a restaurant, struggling to rebuild her life from scratch. She'd been going to therapy, trying to understand how she'd been so blind to what was happening around her. "I need to apologize," she said when she showed up at my apartment one evening. "Not just for the wedding, but for everything. For going along with Mom and Dad's plan to isolate you, for believing their lies about you being unstable, for not standing up for you when they were trying to destroy your reputation." We talked for hours that night. She told me how our parents had manipulated her throughout her life, making her dependent on them financially and emotionally so she would never question their activities. She explained how they had convinced her that I was jealous of her success and would try to ruin her wedding out of spite. She realized now that they were using me, My entire identity was built around being their perfect daughter, and they used that to control me and keep me quiet about things that didn't seem right. Melissa and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. She's working hard to create a life based on her own values rather than our parents' expectations. She's dating someone new, a teacher who cares more about her character than her family connections. And she's been attending the trials, listening to the evidence against our parents, and learning the full extent of their criminal activities. My relationship with Sarah has evolved too. What started as a professional partnership became a deep friendship based on shared values and mutual respect. She helped me process the complex emotions of exposing my own family, and she helped me understand the community dynamics that had allowed the corruption to flourish for so long. We've worked together on several other investigations since then, and I found a new purpose in my journalism career. Instead of just reporting on crime after it happens, I'm focused on exposing corruption before it can cause more damage to communities. The recognition for our work has been gratifying. I won a state journalism award for my coverage of the corruption scandal, and Sarah was promoted within the FBI. But more importantly, our city has implemented new oversight procedures for government contracts, and several other communities have used our case as a model for identifying and preventing similar corruption networks.
But by excluding me, they gave me the emotional distance and motivation I needed to see their activities clearly. If they had included me in their family events and continued to treat me as a beloved daughter, I might never have looked closely enough at their finances to discover the truth. The wedding exclusion was painful, but it was also liberating. It forced me to stop seeking approval from people whose approval was conditional on my willingness to ignore their crimes. It taught me that family loyalty shouldn't require complicity in illegal activities. Today, I have relationships built on honesty rather than manipulation. I have work that serves the public good rather than private interests. And I have self-respect that comes from doing the right thing, even when it was difficult and costly. My parents will be in prison for several more years. They've lost everything they spent decades building through criminal activity. Their community standing, their wealth, their freedom, all gone because they chose to steal from the very community they claimed to serve. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing my own family. The answer is always no. The money they stole should have gone to schools, roads, and public services that benefit everyone in our community. Their crimes hurt real people, and allowing them to continue would have made me complicit in that harm. But I do feel sad about what we lost as a family, not the fake relationships based on lies and manipulation, but the genuine love and connection that might have been possible if they had chosen honesty over greed. Melissa and I are proof that healing is possible, even after severe family trauma. We're building something new together, a relationship based on truth, mutual respect, and shared values. It's not the family either of us imagined growing up, but it's authentic in a way our childhood family never was. And who knows? Maybe someday, when my parents are released from prison, we'll be able to have honest conversations about what happened and why. Maybe they'll be able to acknowledge the harm they caused and work to make amends. Maybe we'll find a way to forgive each other and move forward. But even if that never happens, I know I made the right choice. I chose truth over lies, justice over family loyalty, and community service over personal comfort. And that's something I can live with, no matter what the cost. Sometimes the people who exclude you from their lives are actually doing you a favor. They're showing you who they really are and giving you the opportunity to choose who you want to become. My family's rejection taught me that my value doesn't depend on their approval, and that doing the right thing is more important than maintaining relationships built on lies. If you're facing a similar situation, being excluded, gaslit, or manipulated by family members who want you to stay quiet about their harmful behavior, know that you're not alone and you're not crazy. Trust your instincts. Document what you observe, and remember that you have the right to choose integrity over loyalty.
Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to enable their destructive choices, even if they can't see it that way at the time. What do you think? Did I go too far in exposing my family's crimes, or was I right to choose justice over loyalty? Have you ever been excluded from family events because you asked too many uncomfortable questions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about family secrets and the courage it takes to expose the truth, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because next week, I'm going to tell you about what happened when Sarah and I started investigating my ex-boyfriend's family business and discovered they were running an even bigger scam than my parents ever imagined.